Sporking podcast presents The Beatles, Early Years, a retrospective. Starring Sporking podcast, Tom Corner Jr., the 70s Rock Band.
You did it, Sporking.
Sporking. Yes, you get it, Sporking. Welcome, everybody. It is a Thursday night edition of the Beatles retrospective, which I thought was only going to go maybe 3 weeks, but we're only like in 1960 at the end of 1960. So
We've got to go all the way up to today's date as well.
Yeah, I mean we could with the whole Peter Jackson technology and Martin's son doing like the
we could keep
earlier
going right till now.
Yeah. Dude, it's pretty interesting stuff. But first of all, my panelists, that 70s rock fan, how are you, my friend?
Well, good evening, sir. I am very well, thank you. Thank you. And how are you?
I am good. Let them know who you are, where your channel is, all that good stuff.
I am that 70s rock fan. As it says on the tin.
It's on the tin.
On the tin. That 70s rock fan. And I have a channel, that 70s rock fan, where I do stuff. Some of it's music, some of it's movies, and you can find me there on YouTube and other places. And I do got a show on pop culture and Minefield on Tuesday mornings as well. Morning Coffee.
Very cool.
Brian. And I pop up on all sorts of other things like Midnight's Edge, After Dark, and blah, 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 blah. But that's enough about me.
You got to talk to Tom. I haven't seen Tom in a while. We got to get him on here. He's in the credits.
I mean, he's into the Beatles. He's done Beatles stuff.
I love Tom. Tom is one of the best. He helps out so many like up and coming YouTubers. So.
Oh, he's a great guy. Yeah.
One of the best.
Don't tell him I said that.
Yeah. Me either. But so we left off last time, and I know this is it's a Thursday night one, so it's a little weird because usually I have my stream on Monday and Wednesdays and Saturdays. So people might be like, "What the hell are they doing on a Thursday?" But it works better for you.
Yeah.
And I actually am grateful because you. Literally, like, I had so much fun just listening to you talk, which is rare for me, not talking. Really. So.
I thought I was doing too much of it, really,
No,
dude.
Yeah. No.
I was babbling away like a brook.
Keep it up. We got 6 people watching right now. If you're watching this later on, please make sure and now hit the like button, share it out. We have a tweet out there. Please retweet. Let people know where your grandma might love this shit. So let her in. But Horny Alf is in the chat. So thank you, Horny Alf. Other than that, people are being quiet, and that's fine. You did send a super chat way earlier. So it wasn't up there, but it is here. So thank you, sir, with your your communist Canadian
the 3
$10.
Canadian Nuka-Cola caps. Yeah.
Yes. The Rutland Stones were way better than the
Ruttles.
The Ruttles.
That's
Fact.
a
Please
fact.
explain that so people can understand.
Well, I'm just a big fan of the Ruttles, and of course their big rivals in Rutland were the Rutland Stones. And there was a big divide. You had to support one or the other, really. It was, and there's only 8 people live in Rutland, so it was pretty tricky.
That's a big deal.
Split the entire family, really.
The whole family up, and the one weird guy that people don't know if he's actually family.
But I think there was Neil Innes when he did the Ruttles with Eric Idle. I think they had a thing where they were going to do the Rutland Stones first, but they decided to do the Ruttles as the Beatles.
So awesome. Yeah. That is so awesome. So we did leave off in like the 1960, I would say.
Where did we reach? We reached late 60. They'd done some Hamburg. They'd done the record with Bert Kaempfert.
Yep.
Had they done that by then? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we were talking about, people they were going by the Silver Beatles. They changed their name in August of 60 to the Beatles. That didn't mean that every gig they played, people got that right. But they
Yeah.
did. There was some, relationships early on with Ringo Starr playing for some sessions with Rory Storm.
Rory Storm and the
Yep.
Hurricanes. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I know where we finished off because they got deported from Hamburg
Yes.
for the first time.
Yes. Harrison because he was 18, right?
Yeah.
And then McCartney and Best because they were accused of arson.
Yes. They were accused of burning down the Kino club or wherever that they were living in. Well, they'd signed for this other club, and the guy that owned that club was throwing them out, and they lit a condom. They say they lit this condom and pinned it to the wall so they could have some light to pack their shitty belongings up. He claimed they were trying to burn the place down, but it was enough for the police.
Say that again. They had a what?
A condom.
A condom,
They lit it.
Did they make condoms in the 60s? Wow, I didn't even know
they were made out of wood, and they were 2 inches thick and about that long.
Yeah.
Because they were prehistoric, pre-industrial.
Yeah.
And, so they
the ladies loved it.
Yeah, they did. They were accused of trying to burn this shitty club down that they were living in, or behind this cinema screen or wherever it was. So McCartney and Best were deported for that, and then Lennon ended up making his own way back. And Stuart Sutcliffe stayed in Hamburg because he was with Astrid. So,
and he came back after a little while, but he then returned pretty quick after that in 61.
Yeah, he came back for a little while, did a couple of shows, and then by March I think he buggered off back to Germany because he had a bird and they didn't.
She was pretty hot, I heard. I haven't seen a picture of her, but she was pretty smoking hot, they said.
Yeah, she was one of those Hamburg intellectuals.
Yes.
They had a name for them, and I'm trying to remember it now.
Snobs.
Yes, but anyway, they were all very artsy, and would you like to pet my monkey kind of thing,
right. Didn't Stewart become an artist?
He did. He was actually a very talented painter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how, I think we mentioned it last time, that he won the money. The money he won in a painting competition, they made him spend it on a bass, even though he couldn't play a note.
Right, that's it.
But he really wanted to continue, and he got some kind of university thing in Germany where he could continue to paint, whatever. And but he was out, and I think it suited Paul in some ways because he didn't like Stuart's rivalry for John's affections.
Yeah. That was a very close relationship. We'll just say that.
Yes, and then because it was, well, who's going to play bass, and nobody wanted to play bass, but I think Paul ended up doing it just by default because John absolutely insisted he wasn't going to do it. Yeah,
Stewart was talented, man. I mean, this is some interesting stuff. Like, he had that very Van Gogh-ish feel to him, but the guy was definitely a talented artist. I could see people buying that type of stuff.
He was touted as a guy that was going to become popular, or not so much popular, but well regarded. And if you see some of the stuff, I mean, I'm not a big fan of some of it, but some of it's very Jackson Pollock.
I was just about to say that, like this stuff right here with the picture next to him, very Jackson Pollock. Not as much dots, more like linear, lines, but it has that feel. But he seems to jump around a bit different. A young guy learning his own artwork, but very talented guy, not as talented at playing the bass. So we could say at least that. Not at all. Right.
And he had his party piece in the set, which was to sing "Love Me Tender," which that was the thing he sang. It's the only one he sang solo on, I think. But
that's great. Great.
So then they had the fight over who was going to play bass, and by default it ended with Paul because the others just absolutely insisted they weren't going to do it.
Yeah. Now, also when they return, well, first let me quickly, guys, in the chat, we got Mr. Grant Gregory, a channel member. Thank you, sir. You can always jump on. I don't know if you're busy or not. Bosh McFadden. I say it twice because I never know. Horny Alf, one of the new panelists on the Wednesday dump. He is a memer in his own right too, but a great panelist, good dude. The author Stephen Walton, who is good just lad. coming back, firing on all cylinders, and really,
he's tremendous.
He is tremendous. Like The Ents better watch out because he's going to get a piece of you. The lovely Sherry is here. How are you, Sherry? You can make us as Beatles as a meme. I would love to see that. And Ruben, how are you, my brother? Hail to you.
Hail, Ruben. I believe that the reason Grant hasn't joined us is because he's actually getting excited because the Beatles are about to arrive in Australia to do their first tour. That's how far behind they are in Australia.
Yeah. Elvis just finished up.
That's right.
DJ Odyssey in the house. Are you, I guess, a huge Beatles fan? We'll have to talk. We'll have you on one of the episodes because this is definitely a longer stream series than I thought it was going to be because I assumed after the first one we'd be like at 64, 65. We haven't even got to the end of the 1960s.
So your stream is going longer. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I'm always happy about that. You want a strong stream. So 1960, December, end of the beginning of, almost the beginning of the end. They were almost thinking about breaking up after they came back from
a bit of a low point. Yeah, a bit of a low point, I think. Actually, the Astrid Kircher and her friends, they were the Exes, E-X-I-S, as in short for existentialists.
Oh, Jesus.
And they were all these moody, black-clothed Hamburg students that would go down the slumming it in the Reaper band, and they all kind of fell in love with the Beatles. One of them was Klaus Voormann, who later went on to play bass in a bunch of bands, and then he played on John Lennon's early solo stuff. Klaus
really?
Voormann. Yeah. He was inspired by the Beatles to pick up a bass and start playing.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
See, that's why I love having you on. You bring up stuff that I'm like, no shit.
Lots of shit.
Lots of shit. And, this was pre-Epstein. Epstein comes in next year in 1961. So we got Beatles. The Beatles really are looking like this more than anything. Like they are leather, slick back hair, Elvis style. This is before the suits and the bob, cut mop top that made them famous. I mean, that's something people don't talk. Well, they do, but not as much as, the music, but they inspired fashion for a generation.
Yeah, you could almost make entire streams about their cultural impact just in terms of what they wore. Never mind just the music. But at this point, they were still in their heavy leather rock and roll phase, which a lot of people don't even know about now.
Right.
They think of them as the mop tops with the suits and the collars up to here and whatever.
I could say it was my late 20s. I found that out because I always loved listening to the Beatles growing up. And when I was younger in high school, and then
so much younger than today.
So much younger than today. Absolutely. The early 90s, like grunge was coming around, but a lot of us were looking to the 60s for music. And I was a huge, I love the Grateful Dead, but the Beatles were like, they're always something about Beatles music always just puts me in a better place. They just hit after hit after hit. And it's just melodic and beautiful. And the evolution is amazing. But right here, you got a picture way before that where you have Pete Best on the left, Stewart on the far right, and, the core of the rest of the decade in the middle.
Yes, indeed, and they've got the leather jackets and the tight leather trousers, very much the greased back hair, very much rock and roll. If actually, in terms of the hair, apparently, supposedly, it was Stuart Sutcliffe and the Exes that decided to go for the brushing the hair forward thing, which was still a no-no to the rest of the Beatles because they were rock and rollers.
Right.
They had to have wild, crazy Elvis. Jerry Lee Lewis style roll.
Yeah.
But they did the leather look still. It was still about at least a year away before anybody would mention a suit.
Yep. Right. At least a year, I would say.
But there was praise. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, and people criticized them heavily, especially in Liverpool, for getting into wearing suits and moving away from the leather gear or whatever. But in a sense, they were a little bit ahead of the curve because mod was going to hit. It was going to enter the mod era, which was all about guys dressing sharply,
right,
in sharp suits. So they kind of fitted that ethos quite well.
Yep.
To get out of the leather and get into the suits, even though it was more done from a Brian Epstein perspective of, well, that's what showbiz people do. They wear
Right,
suits
looking more classy to reach a bigger audience.
Yeah, it just happened to just be like 6 months ahead of the mod thing, which was quite handy in the end for them,
But they were, they were, and so they were ready to break up. But what a lot of people say saved them was a December 27th show at the Litherland Town Hall in Liverpool.
Yeah,
and they, I guess it was ruckus, and the story goes like this. So in December of 1960, the band was close to breaking up after returning from Hamburg, where they endured violence and threats from nightclub thugs. Suddenly, the Beatles were offered a gig at the town hall in Liverpool. In their leather jackets and greased hair, the band played loud and hard. The kids danced like crazy, suddenly starting to rush the stage, trying desperately to get close, and the boys were stunned at the near riot. As John Lennon told me in 1964, this small event restored their confidence, and the band lived to play another day. And that is a quote from Larry Kane, who, if you know the Beatles, like DJ I'm seeing definitely knows, and you do too. Larry Kane was with the Beatles from 64 to 65, a journalist who really got to know the guys really well.
Yeah, and what happened at that gig? I mean, they'd kicked around after kind of coming back from Hamburg. They'd kind of straggled around a bit. They finally got their shit together, got back together and got this gig at the Litherland Town Hall, and they'd had that year or whatever in Hamburg.
Yep.
Nobody in Liverpool had seen them. When they left for Hamburg, they were a bunch of bums.
Right.
Basically, like other bands looked down on them.
Right.
Although those scruffy bunch of idiots, they can't even play. So when they actually hit the stage at this gig and absolutely rocked the place with a year's worth of Hamburg steel,
right, that sex,
people went,
it's
the same guys. Man. What the hell?
Yeah, I mean, it was a different world in Germany. And real quick, I want to say hello to Rob out there, Robot Shlomo, big help to me in my early career here at YouTube. Thank you for being in the chat. Hey, next week, Rob, DJ, if you guys want to come on with us next week, I will totally. I'll send you guys DMs on Twitter. I would love to have you join us next Thursday, because I know you guys know your stuff and you could be prepared where we ever leave off if we make it to 64 tonight, which I doubt. But I appreciate you guys. And thank you everybody for being here, like Lord Toth and the rest of you guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, like that is something people don't realize is the early Beatle like that like, yeah, I want to hold your hand, but they also had that, that like that just rough side to them. They were, and it wasn't Liverpool. It was a bit don't get me wrong. It was Liverpool, but it was Hamburg too. And Hamburg doesn't get enough credit.
No, I think Hamburg made them musically. That being forced to perform for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
With half-hour breaks every 2 hours and just having to play hundreds of songs and to entertain a crowd in a club for hours on end, it just made them. I mean, they became like rock hard, and if phrasing, it's made, so it put steel in them. And when they came back to Liverpool from being bums a year like before that, they were suddenly the best band in the city.
Yeah, they cut their teeth out there, man. What people don't realize, I mean, they were hanging out with strippers. They were hanging out with,
life was hell.
Gang type, mafia-ish type people of Germany. Yeah, life was hell, right? These guys were playing for crowds that didn't care that they were there.
It's a port city, Hamburg.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of sailors down in the Reaper band want to spend their cash, get drunk, beat people up and have a good time, meet hookers. They were playing in front of these guys and they had to entertain them. But luckily they were such personalities that they made a lot of good friends, like with the bouncers and guys like that would protect them and look out for them, Horst Fascher and guys like that. So they were fairly safe even in that environment. Well, not safe from their own proclivities, of course, as the doctors would probably tell them.
Probably not. One second, I got to say hi to Mrs. Spork, so you keep going, my brother.
No, it's okay. So yeah, the having gone from bums to coming back to Liverpool and playing this one gig at Litherland Town Hall, December 27th, 1960. I really wish there was a recording of that, because apparently they absolutely destroyed it. It was like heavy, heavy rock and roll. And all the other bands in Liverpool suddenly realized that, well, these guys are not the guys that left 6 months ago.
Right.
Different story entirely. In fact, the funny thing was they were advertising, and people thought they were from Germany.
I've heard that before. Yeah. Like
'Cause
they weren't a Liverpool band, which is
direct
crazy.
from Hamburg, the Beatles, you know, like,
Right.
who are these guys? Because they were nothing when they left.
Right. Well,
But yeah, that absolutely knocked. I wish we could go back in time and just see that gig, because apparently it was mental.
it was out of control, they say. And then a couple nights later for New Year's performance, they were at the Kashba Club, which was Pete Best's mom's club, correct?
Yeah, it was. And she was still kind of managing them a bit. I know Alan Williams was booking them gigs, but she thought of herself as the manager, as did Pete.
Okay.
At that time, still. But,
Gotcha.
you know.
Now, I know that one of the first shows, that December 27th at the town hall, Stewart wasn't there, temporarily replaced by Chase Newby. Now, I don't know.
Chaz Newby.
Yeah. Chaz Newby, that's right.
Chaz Newby was a Liverpool guy who was in a bunch of bands, and I'm trying to remember, was it King Size Tailor and the Dominoes? One of these other bands that was actually way above the Beatles when they started, but then
it wasn't the Pacemakers, right?
No, he was. I don't think he was in Jerry and the Pacemakers. It might have been the King Size Tailor.
Okay.
Who were, or was it it wasn't the Big Three, because that was a different guy. See, I used to know this stuff off the top of my head.
Blackjacks?
Yeah, he was in a bunch of bands.
That was Best Bands, right? Yeah.
He did play bass for them a bunch of times, and I'm just trying to remember. He was in the Quarrymen on and off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he was an early friend of theirs.
Yeah, he was kind of John's pal and kind of hung about. I don't think he really made a career of it after that. Mm-hmm. Like, he was in a bunch of bands in Liverpool and then got a proper job, well, they went on to, but he was a friend of John's.
Right. Yeah. So now we're in 61 and things start to change for them. So the Beatles, again, at the town hall, they play a couple different, various venues, but their first lunchtime performance, February 9th, 1961 at the Cavern, which truly they are known for changing their life, was the Cavern.
Yeah, now they're totally associated with that venue, which is quite, and I've been in the Cavern as it is now.
Okay.
Which is only part of what because the old Cavern club that they played in then, Liverpool City Council, in their infinite wisdom, knocked it down and filled it in the 70s to build a car park. And then they went, wait a minute, the most famous band in the world used to play here.
Right.
Maybe we made a mistake. So
this might be something.
So they kind of excavated it out a bit. And so some of where if you go there now, some of it is the original Cavern, some of it's bit that they built to imitate it. But it's still pretty neat, and it is a tiny little dark hole in the ground. And they had that lunchtime gig there, which was really neat because all the office workers around would go and see them on their lunch break.
I was just about to say that. It wasn't just like a lunchtime, a couple people there. I mean, the place would be packed for lunch.
And it would be full of girls.
Yeah, girls coming from this, their office jobs, having maybe a pint, but seeing these crazy leather-clad guys playing heavy, what was then heavy
indeed
music.
They were playing Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, as well as a bunch of standards as other what you'd call novelty numbers, I guess now, but it was all still heavy rock and roll. Songs like Rock and Roll Music, and they were playing some early Motown stuff too,
which was a big influence.
Yeah, big influence. So getting that regular gig there meant they were going to get first of all, they were getting paid.
Right,
not
which is a big
money.
deal.
And then secondly, they started to build up an actual following.
Yep.
Because people went there every day to see them, and those girls went there every day, and they would stand at the front.
What is the woman that used to run their fan club? I can't remember.
God, yeah.
That's how she met them.
Yeah. Fran Drescher? No.
No. That was the nanny. That was the nanny.
I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
It'll come back to us. Yeah.
Yeah,
worry.
it will.
I know what you mean.
She was one of the people that lunchtime, concert was how she got to know the Beatles and became a huge part of their marketing.
Well, they actually, that fan club which she ran, and amongst of other girls mainly, Brian Epstein used those people. They didn't get paid for that. They did it for fun.
No. Yeah,
and
she had so much memorability. There's a great documentary. Frida.
That's it.
Frida was her name, and lovely Frida, and she was. There's a great documentary about her because she was one of those people that didn't write a book after the Beatles broke up and didn't really make anything off of them until this documentary that I think her daughter
Frida Kelly. I just looked it up. Frida Kelly. Yeah.
Frida, and she has a great story. So if you've never seen that documentary, I think it's called Lovely Frida or something to that effect. It's an awesome documentary.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And she did eventually get a job with Brian Epstein as his secretary.
Yep.
So she eventually did get a career out of it, but for the first couple of years, it was
out of her house.
Yeah.
And it was out of her house.
They would respond to thousands of letters.
Yep.
Once the Beatles became famous and the mail came flooding in. Good old Frida. Yeah.
Good old Frida. That's it. Yeah. Yes. She also, Epstein. Oh, yeah. I don't want to confuse him with the other guy may
Epstein.
have, Epstein. But Epstein, he did hire her, and she was a force of nature. Like if you watch that documentary, like she went through probably, I would say at least hundreds, maybe even thousands of different girls, because a lot of girls wanted just to see a Beatle. So when they moved to London and Abbey Road, Abbey Road, when Apple, what was the name of their record company?
Apple, yeah.
It was Apple, okay.
Yeah.
When Apple took off, she had a big presence there. She did a little bit more than just the fan club.
She did, and even up to the early 70s, she was still responding to fan club mail.
Yep.
Which
they
was
had
incredible.
like a monthly. She had a monthly that went out too. That was very actually now some of those are worth a lot of money.
And the fan club magazine, she did that too.
Yeah,
so the magazines are collectible too.
Yep. And she, the newsletter, then the magazine, she even would literally follow the guys after a haircut, pick up their hair clippings and send them to girls. So it wasn't like
sent them to me.
Right. It wasn't a bullshit thing. Like they literally got Beatle hair. It might've been a mixture, but they got Beatles hair.
That's right. I wonder which one this is.
Right. Matt, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Small time. Thank you for coming, guys.
She had a monthly.
Yeah, she had.
You people are wicked.
They are. No, Small Time is one of the best. Him and Bosch and Bush and all those guys. They are quick.
Indeed.
They're quick.
They're all supporters of me. They're all great
yeah,
guys
they're
too.
Fantastic dudes. So thank you guys for showing up. I don't care. These are the type of streams. It's like the amount of people, I don't care. I just want fun people in the chat having a good time. So enjoy it. Say stupid stuff. Love it. Please do. Next week we'll have DJ Odyssey. We'll have Rob on, and it'll be awesome too. But so
apparently, by the way, they got paid £5 for that first Cavern gig.
£5,
which isn't bad.
Not bad back then, right?
So 61.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you considered it would maybe cost you £1 a day to eat and have a beer,
right.
That's not bad.
Right. So February 25th, think of this, George Harrison's 18th birthday.
I know.
18 years old. What?
18. Yeah.
What? He was a pup.
I know, and that's how, because then he could return to Hamburg.
Yeah, right. And they did. They did go back.
But
now,
he was 18. And they had a party, I think, didn't? Oh no, that was they had
Keith
I'm thinking of the farewell show that they did before they went back to Hamburg.
I was going to ask you, the Beatles farewell show. That was just a show for them going back to Hamburg, right?
Well, yeah, they must have signed another. I think they were going back now to the was it the Star Club or the Top 10 was the bigger one?
I think it might have been the Top 10 Club.
Yeah, the bigger one. and I'm guessing again it was probably Alan Williams that signed that deal, that contract, because Brian Epstein wasn't on the scene by then.
Oh, that, you know what? Valid
Uh,
point, man. It
it-
was the top 10 club. They started July 1st and made 92 appearances at that club.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, top 10, as well
That's
as
crazy.
playing a couple of gigs at some other big concert hall there.
Right,
'Cause
sharing
they were
the bill.
stars. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been Alan Williams that signed that probably. So they had a big gig, like a farewell show at the Aintree Institute, which I'm assuming it was always out near the horse racing
Right.
ground in Aintree in Liverpool. And it went on all night till 8 a.m. with
Yes.
chorus. So Jerry and the Pacemakers were there,
8 a.m.,
Rory Storm and
man.
the Hurricanes. So they partied.
I gotta show this because I love lovely Sherry. She is freaking amazing. She is. I love
She
the
is.
Legion of Memers, but she comes up with some just downright awful. I want to hold your wang. The Beatles. At least you're John. I get
That's-
Paul.
Well, you know, I
I-
won't discriminate between them.
Yeah,
Well,
I feel like I
yeah,
look like Matt Walsh in that picture. That's a weird one.
Yeah,
And you look special in that picture.
you
We'll
may
just
be
say
Paul,
that.
but you're not wearing a woman's fur coat.
Yeah, true. But he
Because
wore
I
it
think
well.
it was Ringo's wife's fur coat. I think he's wearing there.
He wore it well.
He wore it
I can't wait till we get to even that. That's a fun. They
Oh, there's
they
so
were the
much.
first, man. They were the first
Yeah.
to do a lot of things. But yeah, we get back. So the farewell tour was March 11th, March 15th. Stewart leaves for good.
Yeah.
Moves in with Astrid.
He must have gone back to Germany just before the others then. If they
Yeah,
didn't start
well,
playing
right.
until April.
Yeah, they didn't start playing to April. He went back on the 15th of March. So
Yeah.
he was gone. So they played those 92. Some of those top 10 club shows was a shared bill with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, who, you know, like Tony Sheridan, Rory Storm, like these bands, Gary and the Pacemakers. I don't feel like they get enough Liverpool love outside of Liverpool.
Jerry and the Pacemakers are an interesting band because for a long time they were almost equally as popular as the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, they had just as many top 10 hits in the first year or two, and
Oh, yeah.
were hugely popular. They made a movie, Ferry Across the Mersey.
That I didn't know. Okay, that I
yeah.
didn't know. I didn't know they made a movie.
Yeah, which had a lot of actually quite well-known British craft people working, like cinematographers and stuff. You know, but that was, they made a movie. They had just as many top 10 hits in the first year, I think.
Yep.
After the Beatles became big in the US too. And Jerry Marsden, he was a wonderful, wonderful performer. My wife and I were lucky enough to see him on one of these package tours that they did in the 90s with
I was going to say,
older bands. And the voice was still beautiful.
yeah.
The minute
Talented.
he opened his voice, it was just incredible. Yeah,
I would have loved to see that.
It was great. It was actually quite emotional. But
Yeah.
So he could still do it, you know, right up until, I mean, he's obviously passed away now, but he was a wonderful, wonderful performer, deserved all the success he got. The difference between bands like Jerry and the Pacemakers and the Beatles is that they couldn't really take the steps forward
Right.
to progress their sound.
Right.
And they didn't have the same songwriting capability, which is not their fault. They wrote
No.
songs, but not as many or to the same standard. So, but at the time, they were hugely popular and a great little band. As Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, not many performances of theirs exist, certainly not in video that I'm aware of. You can get a couple of dodgy audio performances of them in Hamburg. They were apparently an absolutely tremendous band as well live.
Right.
With Ringo and the drums, but Rory Storm would be one of these guys that could do acrobatics on stage. He would climb the curtains and leap from the,
Right.
the rafters
Right.
and
They
do
were
somersaults.
a crazy live show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the talent in Liverpool was something else, you know.
It was it was like you know, the Summer of Love in San Francisco with all those bands. Like, it was a moment in time that I truly don't think it gets enough credit for because of how big the Beatles were. You know, they were so massive, but in that moment, there was some great, like, think about being an 18-year-old kid, you know, your lunch break, seeing the Beatles and seeing some of these other bands. Like,
well, also, don't forget there was the Searchers, who are a Liverpool band, and they had a huge number of hits. They were performing roughly at the same period, maybe a year behind those guys. So you'd have the Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, and a bunch of other Liverpool acts that were ultimately became successful as well.
Right.
But the Searchers, a huge North American success with Needles and Pins and songs like that.
Right.
Had that jangly guitar thing, the Rickenbackers, which the Beatles did a bit of too, of course. But so there was a lot of talent in that one city, you know. And I think it was nice because everyone was used to London being the center of the musical world in the UK.
Right.
To have this other place, this provincial, rough working class backwater, suddenly be the dominant force was a bit of a one in the eye for the South, you know. Like,
right. Well, you know, those were true blue collar area, you know. It was a true blue collar one.
And at that time, they were all still, whilst they were rivals, they were all still good pals. I mean, these bands were all hanging out and having fun. And then they all followed the Beatles to Hamburg eventually as well.
Yep.
So,
now, while they were in Germany, they also credited as the Beat Brothers, played backup music and vocals on Tony Sheridan's My Bonnie. 2 tracks of Tony Sheridan's My Bonnie.
Yeah, so I guess Bert Kaempfert, who was a well-known German composer and had a couple of hits in the US, in fact, with instrumental stuff, I think Walk in the Black Forest and stuff like that. He must have been sort of sniffing around the Reaper band for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he just went there to see the bands, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, he went and saw them. He'd heard about the reputation of some of these bands, including the Beatles, and Tony Sheridan, who they were hanging out with in Hamburg, and who was a very accomplished singer and guitarist. Real pro. I mean, the Beatles were still pretty rough. He must have, I think he went down there to see them and said, okay, well, Tony, I want to make a couple of records with Tony Sheridan. Tony Sheridan didn't have a permanent backing band. You guys want to do this?
And then because of that, they got that 1-year contract with him.
Yeah, and so they did that first session where they played, I think it was My Bonnie.
Yep,
which was,
My
so
Bonnie.
the thing the Germans liked was rocked up standards.
Right.
So a song like My Bonnie or well, you pick an old standard, rock it up. They love that shit.
Like a folk song, old, country folk song, and rock it up.
Rock it up. So My Bonnie fitted that. And of course, Tony Sheridan sang it. And there was a few other tracks that they played backing on that he sang, and they did on their own. They did Ain't She Sweet, which you can still obviously hear today on Anthology and things like that.
Yep.
And an instrumental, Cry for a Shadow, which is, I think, a Harrison McCartney credit on that one.
That I don't know. I do know, and DJ Odyssey just threw it up.
Harrison
Ain't
Lennon.
She Sweet was John singing.
Yeah, it's one of I think maybe the only one at that session that he actually sang.
Yep.
Others were all Tony Sheridan. No, I think it was Harrison Lennon was Cry for a Shadow. It was an instrumental, little instrumental track. So there's a lot of other tracks out there that people claim were from those sessions, but there's really only a half dozen or so.
Well, I love this one because we talked about this backstage. I don't think we talked about this on the stream, how the first hit for the Rolling Stones was a McCartney, Lennon.
Yeah, I Want to Be Your
song.
Man, which to the chagrin of Jagger and Richards was their first real hit in Britain.
Yeah.
I don't think it was actually their first single, but it was their first hit.
First hit, right.
Because I think they had a couple of songs before that weren't hits, but then they basically inveigled. They were hanging out at Stones, and when I say a Stones recording session, we're talking 1963 here, very early Stones.
Yeah.
They were hanging out with them, and I think Mick said, "Oh, could you write us a song, or whatever, however he's spoken." It's a song. So they went into the corner, John and Paul, and there you go. I Want to Be Your Man. Now, it did end up in their first album too, but Ringo sang it. That's how much they thought of the Stones, because they gave them Ringo's song. So that was the start of them writing shit for other people. They wrote a ton of stuff for Billy J. Kramer and all these other Liverpool acts. Got a lot of their songs, and they were there's that famous clip of Paul saying, well, one of the things we might do, because nobody's going to last in this business more than X amount of years, we'll maybe start writing songs as a sideline to give to other people,
Right.
They thought they
That's
were all
great.
going to be done in 2 years. So that was
Can you
him already.
imagine that? Can you imagine that? That's insane. That's insane.
But the Bert Camford stuff was pretty rough and ready. I mean, he basically recorded them in what would be on the stage at some kind of concert hall, like a high school concert hall. One or two mics, bang, record it. But actually, they don't sound bad, those records.
Right.
If you listen to My Bonnie, it's got a really good driving rhythm on it.
Right. Oh no, yeah, you're right.
Actually, I think it's quite good. I mean,
well, they were getting. I mean, from all these live shows, they were very tight.
Yeah.
They played 92 shows from April to July at the Top 10 Club.
Yeah.
Think about that. 92 shows.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And I think the hours were less than the Star Club stuff. It was probably less hours, but still a lot of gigs.
Yeah. Their final show at the Top 10 was July 1st, and on July 3rd, they returned to Liverpool, and this is when, I mean, it just starts happening, man. I mean, within a couple of years, they're the biggest band in the world.
It didn't take long, really.
It really didn't. Didn't.
Yeah, so from mid 62 to mid 64, bang, it all happened.
And something that helped them big time was this Mercy Beat.
Well, the Mersey Beat,
Beat, yeah.
That was because that was in the days when you had music papers, and that was the Liverpool one. There was so much music going on that this was a popular publication because it would talk about all the bands in Liverpool and where they were playing, and it was essential stuff.
Yeah.
I think even Alan Williams may have been something to do with it. Alan Williams, who may have published this, I
really
seem to recall.
Well, that makes sense because then, because Lennon has a essay in it about the Beatles, so you would think he would want to get them out there, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you know of that essay?
Yeah, it was Bill Harry. Sorry, no, I'm getting my guys mixed up. Bill Harry was the Liverpool guy that founded it, not Alan Williams.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the words off the top of my head, but it said, the man appeared upon a flaming pie and said, "You're Beatles with an A," etc. Because people kept asking him, where's the name from? So he had to come up with a story.
Can I tell you, quite a few people from our first stream, like people in my real life and people like messaging me, never knew the Beatles were Beatles, like a beat. Like they were like, "Oh my God, you blew my mind with that." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah.
I thought that was like a common thing, but most people just never realized it was spelled as Beatles,
Yeah, and it commonly got misspelled all the time
Yes.
in gig posters and publications.
So then we have, Ringo Starr's birthday on the 21st of July, the 7th of July, which they all went to, again, creating that bond, kind of getting it a little bit deeper and,
Well, yes, because it's starting to get
a little rough with
still
Pete
there,
Best.
but
you'll start seeing moments where Pete, he's ill or something and didn't make the show.
Because Ringo did stand in a number of times for him. He just didn't turn up or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why he was mean, moody, and magnificent.
Right. Well, you know what it might have been too. I mean, they've been playing nonstop, and come July of 61, they do the lunchtime and evening slot at the Cavern, plus, periodically playing all different places. They again, they're starting to grow. You would think, okay, like you would want to be a part of that, but I'm sorry, he was just different than the other guys. He was quieter. He was more set in the background.
Introspective, quiet.
And a lot better looking.
The girls loved him at the Cavern sessions and at lunchtime. The girls loved Pete.
Yeah. Yep. And I love how you put this one here talking
Cilla
about
Black.
Yeah, that actually the Beatles in July 26th of 61.
Yeah.
She was then known Priscilla White. They actually supported her at the Cavern.
Well, she actually worked there. She worked as a hat check girl or whatever there, and they were friends with her. She was a lovely lass.
Yep.
And they encouraged her to get into singing in later years. Yeah, gave her some songs, and obviously Brian Epstein signed her and whatever. And she did go on independently to become a huge star.
Yeah.
In Britain for many decades. Beloved TV. She had TV shows and presented stuff, and she was quite a big star for many years. But she started just hanging out with them, really.
Yeah. So Mercy Beat again, talking about their contract with Camphor.
Yeah. Well, this again caused a lot of confusion because some people thought they were German band because they had this record out coming from Germany, but and the record stores. I mean, nobody was going to be stocking that hardly in the UK. It would never even be heard of in the UK, other than the fact Beatles fans started asking for it in record stores. Where's this record by the Beatles? My Bonnie. What record?
Yeah, that's how. I mean, yes, actually, that's coming up very soon.
It is,
in October of that year. The Beatles, though, Lennon's Bob Wooler wrote another article about the Beatles and
he was a writer and he was the DJ at the Cavern. At the Cavern.
Oh, at the Cavern.
Yeah, and other places, but the Cavern. He was the regular DJ at the Cavern.
DJ,
the house DJ, yeah. And he had all these little sayings and phrases he would use when he introduced records and acts. So he was a big part of he loomed large in their legend too.
He was a big part of the Epstein, he introduced them, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah. He was one of the connections that, helped Brian, because Brian was from a completely different world, helped him to realize what was going on in these places.
Right. Well, Brian was upper class, He was.
He was like.
He was ritzy for Liverpool.
But because he liked running the record store at NEMS, he was interested in what the kids were listening to.
Yep. I mean, talk about somebody who, had no experience at being a manager, but just felt the pulse of teenagers at that time.
He was fascinated by this scene. Because they all came into his record store. He saw all the kids and he could see the records they were buying. And he prided himself in never not getting a record for someone if they asked for it.
Right.
So no matter what it was. He would always make sure he found them a copy somewhere.
Right.
Which is where the My Bonnie thing came in.
Unless it was East German or something like that.
Well, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the wonders that movie was based on the Beatles. I mean, it really was, like there was little bits from others, the one guy with the shades and, but it
touch of
really,
Bob Dylan or folk.
The little folk.
Touch of folky bit in there, there with the guy that with
thing
the
you do. Right?
Yeah. The leader of that band, of course, later on he's more into the folky stuff. He doesn't want the rock and roll stuff.
Right.
But it's a typical experience for an early 60s beat band.
Right. Really quick.
Yeah.
That one huge hit and you're out. You're out. And I don't care. I'm with you, McFadden. I think it's cheesy, but I enjoyed the movie. I had,
a lot of heart, a lot of fun, and it captured that sound. I think it was Adam Schlesinger, was it, that did some of the music, Fountains of Wayne guy, or it was somebody like that did the actual music, and it was really good.
Yeah. I also think the guy from Fountain. No, I was going to say
I might be wrong.
The OC song, but I'm wrong about that. I think.
I get my 90s pop bands mixed up.
Right.
Fountains of Wayne. It could be
something I find cool. My son was born in 2021 on John Lennon's birthday, so he's exactly 50 years younger than Lennon. No, not 50. I'm sorry. That would be 60. No, 50. I'm 60. 60. Add another 80 to that, 81. So he was 81, but I'm saying from his birthday in October of 61. Sure. I really screwed that up. But yeah, him and
But there is a mystical connection between them, is what you're saying.
And my son's going to be a famous musician and hopefully
your son is the walrus.
Yeah, cuckoo, my brother.
He is the walrus.
On his 21st birthday, him and McCartney though hitchhiked to Paris. That's like a legendary story. They bowler hats and
And there are some photographs of that, yeah. But
Is there? Oh, I'm
yeah,
looking
there's a
it up.
couple of photographs kicking around that they took of that. But yeah, it was funny because I know Paul and John were close, but that was kind of the first sign that they were. Before it had been Stuart and John, but then of course
Right.
Stuart went off to Germany and stayed there. So Paul kind of became closer to him, I think. Who knows? Unless you were there, they obviously had something.
I think it was something. I mean, they've known each other since they were 15 and 16 or 17. But they weren't friends. They were introduced, and I think this created. They had a bond that you could say was like brothers because they fought like brothers. They cared about each other like brothers.
They lost their mothers, so that was a bond.
Right, right. I think that was a huge part of their connection was the loss of mothers. But they also had a competitive side to them that was pretty freaking competitive. Let's just put it that way. I mean,
absolutely.
They wanted to beat each other.
And it was probably better for us then because we got all this competition in songwriting and recording. That the internal competition isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Right,
band,
absolutely.
Until it tears a band apart.
Sometimes tears them apart, but sometimes it's great. You have, in the next couple days after that, the Beatles play the St. John's Ambulance benefit. They do their first fan club performance at the David Lewis Club.
Now that's interesting because by then, obviously, Frida had got the fan club thing going, and this is still 61.
That's what I'm trying to say. 61.
Yeah.
And she was the heart and soul of that. So, like, anybody who thinks, like, she is such an integral part of their fandom. And the reason why fans felt like they were a part of it and they had some ownership in the Beatles because of her responding to them, keeping them in the loop. They felt like they were in a club that was, other people didn't get, the inside track on what these guys were up to.
Yeah, and she was always very discreet about it, which I think they liked,
Yep.
And so by this time they'd come back from that top 10 set of gigs.
Yep.
They were back in Liverpool playing these gigs, and then the fan club performance, but then just a few days later is the release of My Bonnie in Germany.
And the Saints. Yep.
And the Saints.
My Bonnie and
again,
the
they love these rocked up standards.
Yep.
When the Saints go marching in. Yeah.
Yep, which is hilarious to me. And DJ Odyssey, I disagree. Eddie and the Cruisers, fantastic. Spinal Tap, fantastic. But you also got to put, what's that one with about the 70s band, the kids following them?
Almost Famous.
Almost Famous is definitely higher than That Thing You Do.
But I mean, that's a whole show in itself. In fact, I did a whole show about fictional bands.
Oh man, we could do that someday.
About a year ago, but I could easily do another one. We could do another one.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
for sure, my brother, for sure.
Yeah, there's so many good examples, and there's so many bad examples.
And October 28th, 1961, changed Beatles history forever. Epstein is asked by a customer named Raymond Jones, which is hilarious that people he is a historical figure now because he asked about the Beatles' My Bonnie single at is it NEMS or NEMS?
It's NEMS.
So, but they didn't call it NEMS. It was NEMS, right?
Well, I don't know because I've never heard anybody from Liverpool talking about it.
I always wondered that, man.
So it was a huge. He had his family owned department stores all over the Liverpool and Lancashire, and one of them had this record store in it, but it was Northeast something. I can never remember that. So I would always say NEMS, but I guess a lot of people would say NEMS because it's shorter,
Right.
So we can call it NEMS. It's nice and easy. But yeah, that's possibly the most pivotal day, given it's all of a sudden Brian Epstein is involved.
Yes.
All of a sudden. That one thing. Yeah, they got that record by the Beatles. It's called My Bonnie.
Right. That's it.
Done. Never heard of them. Who are they? Well, are they German? Whatever. I mean, I guess people were asking about it because it was in the Mersey beat.
Right. Well, 2 days later, 2 girls asked for it, so he ordered 200 copies.
Yeah, and Alistair Taylor
Yes. His
was
assistant.
working for Brian Epstein even then, and of course he worked for him right through, and then beyond Brian Epstein's death, he was a
Yep.
big part of Apple, and
Yep.
so he worked with them for many years too. So there's two players in the scene.
Yep. Yep.
There, but yeah, I
Do
guess
you agree
so.
with this from Darth Scipio? That they were collaborators and not rivals. See, I
think
thought
they were both really. I mean,
Yeah.
they were certainly up until they stopped touring in '66. They worked very closely together on songs,
Right,
even though
and
they
it-
did write their own because they were in hotel
rooms. Yeah, exactly.
And
But
they would
after that,
sit-
I felt like it.
then after that, they went to their own homes and
Yeah.
spent a lot of time working on their own material to bring it back to the band.
Right.
So it became around about. He's right. I mean, Sergeant Pepper era was when they had stopped touring. They were living in their own homes, living their own lives, and just coming back. So they were much more rivals then.
Mm-hmm.
He's not wrong.
No, he does a valid point. I feel like it might have been a couple albums earlier.
They
like,
still.
You see, I think about it. You had Revolver, Rubber Soul. I mean,
there was a competition to see who would get their songs on the album, even
Right.
though they were all credited to Lennon and McCartney. So John, like, if you look at an album like Help, it's almost all John.
dude, that song, wow.
Whereas from then on, Paul started to gain primacy in number of tracks, whether it's because he just became more good at it or more insistent, or John didn't care as much.
Right.
But up till then, there was always like, well, I want this one.
Yep.
No, I want this one. And that's a good thing because there was quality control.
Yep. I want to say hello, man. It's been a while since I've seen you in the chat. I love seeing you here. The 5 Heartbeats is fantastic. I forgot that was Robert Townsend.
I've forgotten all about that. Yeah.
Holy crap. There's some great ones out there. So then we got, okay, so I'm going to say this wrong. Let's see. Douche.
So that guy douche.
Douche gramophone.
Deutsche Grammophon.
Deutsche Grammophon.
Deutsche
I knew
Grammophon.
that's how I knew it. I should have said it.
Prestigious German label. Used to do a lot of classical stuff.
Right. And Epstein met with them. Even though, oh no, I'm sorry. I jumped way ahead. I apologize.
But it's important that he was trying to get copies of it to release. So that was an important step. But yeah, in between
that, let's see. We have November 8th. Epstein books a ticket and sees the Beatles at the Cavern Club, citing an important visit.
Well, I think he sent Alistair Taylor to get him a ticket.
Right.
Could you go just because he spoke very posh, even though he was from there? Could you go down there and get me a ticket to see? I mean, he could have just turned up at the door probably, but
right. Well,
for some reason they wanted a ticket.
Right. It was for the next day, and him and Taylor went and saw the show, the lunchtime show.
Who are these guys? You
right.
know, I mean, he was, although there's a lot of contention about this, about whether he knew more about the Liverpool scene or not, or didn't know as much, because he claimed years later he had no idea who the Beatles were until this point. They were round the corner, literally playing round the corner.
The thing
he was working in a record store that sold Mersey Beat.
That's what I'm confused about, because you never hear a lot of people refuting this. It's mostly this is how it went. You don't find a lot of people saying no, dude. He knew about them years before, even before the second trip to Germany. Blah blah blah.
Yeah,
but
it's a real. Did he or didn't he? He claims he didn't. He had never heard of them until that point. I don't know. I mean, they were pretty big in Liverpool, but then again, he moved in different circles. He was more into classical and opera and
right.
But then on the other hand, they were selling Mersey Beat, which he must have seen 1 million copies of in his record store. So who are these guys dressed in leather on the front? Because he may have fancied them. I don't know.
Right. Well, he definitely fancied John.
John.
Yeah.
Tight leather trousers. It was the trousers. That was the Ruttles, of course. What was it attracted you to them? It was the trousers, really. It was
the trousers.
The tight trousers.
Very tight. Very tight.
Very, very tight.
So December 1st, 1961, the Beatles and Epstein traveled to London to meet Colin Borland and Beecher Stevens from Decca Records in hope of negotiating a record contract.
I'm wondering by this time, obviously, if he was doing that for them, he must have, by this time, talk to them about managing them.
I mean, right, because it's been a month. It's been about a month
Yeah.
from when he saw them at the Cavern and it kind of goes back to what you said. Like, he must have had like, you're telling me one show made you say, I am going to put this much effort in. I think he might have known a little bit more. But again, no one refutes it.
I'm trying to remember exactly when he met with them in August. Was it August? No, he met with them in October.
Uh-huh.
Or November, sorry. He met with them in November.
November, right. No, actually, he met with them in December.
Right, so I can't remember the timeline. He couldn't have signed a contract to manage them yet by this time, but he must have at least said, I'm going to try and get your record here.
Well, again, he didn't sign the contract till January 24th of 62, and then wasn't actually official until February. Yeah. So let's just go through the timeline.
Clearly in his mind, though, it's already in his mind, having seen them down in the Cavern and the reaction of the people. People are asking for their records.
At lunch.
People are asking for the record.
Right. Seeing how, rabid the girls were. So people asked for the record in late October. Early November, goes and sees them. In December, already traveling, in hopes of record deals. He also, the douche gramophone as McFadden. I just said
did you say
McFagin?
No,
yeah. Douchey grandma horn. Representative met with him in Liverpool, discussing the release of My Bonnie in the UK. The Beatles meet Epstein at his shop on the 6th of December. I'm just going to go through this quick because it's amazing. Epstein contacts Ron White of EMI on the 8th of December in hopes of getting the Beatles recording contract. On the 9th, the Beatles described as Liverpool's #1 rock outfit from their German tour and all the other things they've done. December 10th, the Beatles meet Epstein again at the Casbah Coffee Club. Casbah. I always want to say Casbah. I don't know why.
It was a cash bar at the Casbah.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah. Mama Bess, make sure you're going to pay.
Yeah. But just basically in that month of December,
it's just stuff happened.
Ton of stuff happened. So Brian Epstein gets on board. He's trying to get them record contacts, even auditions.
Yeah.
So he's going to Decca.
Having people from Decca come see them at the Cavern too.
Yeah. He's trying to get EMI. He's trying to get Decca. He's trying to get some of the big record companies interested in at least auditioning them.
Yeah. Which I find funny though is like EMI rejects the Beatles in December, but yet like there's so many different parts of EMI that we later find out with Martin, like
there's this little corner that they didn't even know about yet.
Exactly.
Parlophone. But EMI rejected the Beatles something like 5 times in total before the Parlophone finally signed them. Just different parts of EMI kept saying no. The Dick Rowe thing at A&R, so in December, as you say, the Dick Rowe sent Mike Smith to watch the Beatles at the Cavern, and Smith recommended to Dick Rowe to set up an audition. So that's why they went down on New Year's to do the first Decca Sessions audition.
Right.
Dick Rowe, of course, famously the guy that turned them down after that.
Right. Well, crazy.
He never lived that down.
No.
And he said, groups with guitars are on the way out.
Yeah. Absolutely, which is insane to me.
So that's the guy also, though, that we must remember did sign the Rolling Stones.
Right.
Because he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice.
Right. I mean, he was there for a very long time. He was there from the 50s to the 70s.
He wasn't going to make that mistake twice.
That was a huge mistake.
But imagine being the man that always introduced at parties as, this is a guy that turned the Beatles down.
Right. And so, I mean, Ron White could have been that person if Martin didn't sign him to an EMI branch because he also turned them down.
And I'm not sure he even heard them. I mean, I'm not sure what they were listening to turn them down. I mean, I know Brian had some tapes. And I know he made acetates out of some of those. But by this point, they hadn't even done the Decca sessions.
Right.
So all he would have is either live recordings or the My Bonnie stuff if he managed to get a hold of a copy. So what EMI were turning them down on basis on, I don't know, unless they saw them live.
Right. And Decca saw them live, a couple people from there, but I don't see anything with EMI reps.
And reading the complete Beatles Chronicles, it doesn't say anything about Ron White actually going to see them, and it's possible he did, but I think maybe they just said, "Nah, we're not interested," because we're more. By then, of course, the British record scene then. So this is late '61. Was moving away from rock and roll. Rock and roll had come and gone in the record company's eyes. It's like every time there's an explosion in something, they try and get a hold of it and then get back to the record company's agenda.
Yes.
And they wanted to go more back to solo pop singers, back to instrumentals.
Yeah.
They didn't see raucous rock and roll or rock and roll bands as being a thing going forward. They wanted to control and make it more MOR. I mean, as you saw, a lot of the early rock and rollers were either out of the picture now, in both in America and Britain, or had been smoothed over and were doing more ballads. And so you take this bunch of guys playing rock and roll, like the Beatles, and if they saw them live, that's what they'd be playing. They went, "Oh, no, that's old-fashioned. We don't want that.
Right.
We want this guy Matt Monroe over here, or we want this Tony Bennett guy, or we want Cliff Richard, who's no longer singing rock and roll. He's now a pop singer. We want that stuff."
Yes.
Not these leather-clad guys, as they still were.
Pope, man. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Pope, you don't have Twitter, do you? Because if you do, I couldn't find you. But Pope is another musical dude.
I know. Well, he's on my panel regularly.
Yep. Pope is awesome.
He is. So they would have rejected him like a form rejection. Yeah, like when you apply for a job and you get a form letter back saying, "Thank you very much, blah, 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 piss off."
Right.
It's a form letter.
It just kills me, man. It just kills me that they do that. Just so everybody knows, I'm putting Pope's YouTube channel in just so people could see it. Because Pope is really good dude. And I believe, Pope, were you on Vet Talk, the one I was watching? Because that's another great channel. But yeah, so again, it's crazy. So they play the big beat ball as the Beatles, the BEET.
That's I mean, this is a great book, by the way.
That's such a, man.
The Complete Beatles Chronicles by Mark Lewison, who's the foremost Beatles expert. He's heavily involved in anthology, whatever. So there's the poster for that one.
Oh my God, right there, yeah. The big beat Tower Ball, the Beatles. Now, see, they spelled their name right there, but it says they were billed as the Beatles, B-E-T. But you had Roy Storm, you had Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Remo 4.
The Remo 4.
Remo 4. I don't know that band.
Yeah, they never became famous. King Size Taylor and the Dominoes, though, who were on the bill, they were the first ones that went to Hamburg. They were the ones that wrote back to Alan Williams and said, "Don't send those bums the Beatles, they'll ruin it for us." And they're there at the bottom of the bill now. So.
That's crazy.
That apparently would have been an awesome night.
Come on. Also, the December 7th, 27th Christmas show at the Cavern Club. First time Ringo Starr replaces a sick Pete Best.
Yeah, first official time.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. That's a big date in that history.
Writing is on the wall.
It really was. And they traveled to London on the 31st because on the 1st they record 15 songs at Decca's studio in West Hampstead.
Now, can you imagine how shitty it is to say, you know what, we've got an audition for you, but it's January the 1st, New Year's Day.
Right.
Like, it's a holiday for one thing. And second, it's the middle of winter, and it was a bad winter that year.
Insane.
So they had to drive down probably they'd have a hangover from New Year's, but anyway, yeah, they had the trip down to Decca and did that audition and did the first 15 songs they did with Decca. So
you got me pinned, McFadden. You got me I didn't realize I do that, but I do. I shake my head at you guys. I nod at him. It's perfect. I hate you. So they do the 15 songs. The Beatles are the top most popular band on the Mersey beat.
So this is where there was this is why years later they said to Brian Epstein, "We'll do the music, Brian," because he said he picked some of the songs he wanted them to do for that audition. So as well as doing some of the rock and roll stuff, he wanted to show what a well-rounded band they were. Yep. So they ended up doing stuff like the chic of Araby, you know, old show tunes, basically.
Yep.
They did Phil Spector stuff, To Know Her Is to Love Her, the Teddy Bears, you know. There's a couple of rock and roll things, Memphis, Tennessee, Three Cool Cats, which is Lieber and Stoller, but it's really not rock and roll, you know.
Okay, so name off the 15. Just name off the songs, because I didn't know.
Well, the list I've got here is Like Dreamers Do, which is a Lennon McCartney original, which they ended up, I think, giving to Billy J. Kramer. They did Money, so that was a heavy rock and roller that they did. So there's their Berry Gordy Motown influence coming in already. They did a cover of Money. Till There Was You, which they used to perform live years later, even. Old stage ballad. Chic of Araby, To Know Her Is to Love Her. No. Take Good Care of My Baby. It's Goffin and King. So some of these are actually good pop songs. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
I don't think they were necessarily with the songs the band might have picked, but Brian kind of said, I want this one, this one. Memphis, Tennessee, Carl Perkins' song, Sure to Fall in Love with You. Another original, Hello Little Girl, which also ended up with Billy J. Kramer as a hit in the late 63. Yeah, it was Liverpool singer Billy J. Kramer. He had a couple of hits of these songs, early Lennon McCartney stuff.
Right.
They gave them to him, basically. Three Cool Cats, Crying, Waiting, Hoping, which is Buddy Holly. Love of the Loved, another Lennon and McCartney original, which Cilla Black ended up getting.
Right. Yep.
Then September in the Rain, and the one I love, Besame Mucho.
Which they recorded for that first LP they did.
Well, it wasn't on the first LP in Britain, but it ended up on a compilation.
With Love Me Do and... It wasn't on that? Okay, I thought it was part of that release.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. But anyway, and then Searchin' was the last one they did on that. So 15 songs, but the one I love is Besame Mucho, because I just love the way they go, cha-cha-boom.
Yeah. So I know we're not here, and we won't talk on it too much, but... I know that Epstein wanted, some singles out. So Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane were put out separately, which were supposed to be on Sgt. Pepper's. But I think the American release of that LP has Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, because I know
that's correct,
and I know it's years later, but the copy I always
there is a version that has those on them,
Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane.
Darth is right. They were taking so long to record the album that EMI kept pressing them to get something out, so they took Sgt. Pepper and Penny Lane and put it out as a double A-side single.
Right.
And in Britain it did not appear on the Sgt. Pepper album, but
I believe in America it did, because all I can remember is my mind was blown when I found out they weren't. Like, I had an argument with someone. I'm like, no, they were definitely on the album, because the album I grew up with had them on it.
Truly, they belonged on it.
It was a perfect album with those.
They belonged on it, and to me, to this day, that double A-sided 7-inch single of those two songs is I think that's the best double A-sided single, best 7-inch piece of vinyl ever made.
Give me something else that beats that.
On having those two songs on either side of that little piece of plastic is the best thing ever.
Strawberry Fields is the melodic. It's beautiful, but Penny Lane is that like upbeat, like perfect songs. And for me, again, growing up, I always thought they were originally on the album, because the album I had them on it. Which is always cool. Yeah,
it's also worth pointing out, though, that although Decca ended up rejecting them from this session, the band they chose instead to sign was a more local band to London called Brian Poole and the Tremolos.
Okay.
So they signed them instead of the Beatles.
That's crazy to me.
Now, the Tremolos did have some hits. Like Silence is Golden was a big hit for them in the 60s. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good song.
So they did have a couple of hits, but they were signed instead of the Beatles.
Right. Okay.
Again,
now,
I guess they were just smoother. They signed them because they were local to London, so they could record them more quickly and cheaper. So.
Huh. Really? Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's so sad.
I love Sorry, I've got to think of the Ruttles thing here now. It mentions it here in the article about this. It said, in the Ruttles, all you need is cash. Danny Aykroyd plays record executive Brian Thigh, who turns down the Ruttles. After ruminating over the millions in royalties lost by Thigh's company, the interviewer, Eric Idle, asks him point blank, What is it like to be such an asshole?
That's fantastic.
Brian Thigh. That's a good one.
That is fantastic. So it took us over an hour to get to 62, but we're there.
We are.
That's why I think we're just going to go like 2 years at a time, maybe.
Yeah, I probably have to put a hard stop in it at the top of the hour anyway, unfortunately, if that's all right with you, mate. So.
No, that's fine with me, man. We'll keep them short and sweet.
So we'll save the explosive stuff.
Right.
Till later.
Early 62 was mostly them getting in and out of contracts ending.
Yeah.
But a big thing happened was the release of the EP My Bonnie in like France and in the UK, My Bonnie and the Saints, with the Beatles. It's Tony Sheridan and the Beatles on that album cover, which is the first time they signed the Epstein contract January 24th. So from November 8th, when he sent someone to get a ticket, to January 24th, where he signed the deal with them, just the amount of work he did he
really
impressive.
Got into it. Yeah, it became a bit of an obsession for him, to his family's puzzlement. They saw it as like his shiny new toy,
right?
But he really did get into it, and he asked people all over about how to do this. He asked people who were managing acts, how do you manage an act? What do you do? Right. How do you get a record contract? How do you book concerts? How do you do this? How do you do that? So he really did his work,
right?
Given he had no experience with it. But I think he finally did sign a contract with them in January of 62. Okay. So by that time, he was all in by then.
He was all in. And, that same day, he books the Beatles to play the Thistle Cafe in West Kirby, Cheshire.
Oh.
Now, I don't know the area, but it sounds uppity to me.
I have no idea. I used to call it Cheeseshire, but it's Cheshire.
Okay.
No, it is Cheshire. He wanted to get them gigs outside of Liverpool, albeit some of them in the local area. Also, the other thing he started to do was to get them gigs supporting other acts, like singers, solo singers that they could back who were going on national tours. I think we'll probably get a little bit more to that later in 62. Right. But yeah, he started to get them out around the country a bit more, because until then it had all been local to Liverpool. So he had a plan.
I just want to say I screwed this up. It was the Magical Mystery Tour that had Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, but I still feel like I've heard it on that album. I know that sounds crazy, but
it really does belong as it was intended on Sgt. Pepper. But they were, as I say, pressured to put something out. They put that as a single, and that was it off Sgt. Pepper, which is a shame because I think they fit perfectly.
Yeah. I'm going to find it somewhere.
How even more astonishing would that album be with those two tracks on it?
I mean, the album is amazing. We all know that it, and it was a counter to Pet Sounds from an amazing American band, the Beach Boys, which doesn't get enough credit for what they did for music. But
there's a whole series we could do too.
Literally. I mean, just Brian Williams himself his story is unbelievable. Just with his father.
Well, we were just talking. My wife and I were just talking about Brian Wilson today, and
I said Williams, Jesus Wilson.
We all don't worry about it, mate. One of these days these guys are going to be gone, and that's going to be the true end of an era.
Oh my God! Right? That's kind of scary.
Brian Wilson. Just what that one man did,
just what he did for music. I mean, just their harmonies alone were unbelievable. What he did.
The studio production techniques, the advances that were made in that mid 60s period by him, by George Martin and the Beatles, incredible advances.
Yep.
And he was still only doing it with 4-track machines. Some of that stuff. Pet Sounds is probably only on a 4-track machine, but just incredible the sonic quality that they could
unbelievable.
Get. Yeah,
unbelievable.
But that's a whole different. We could do an entire series on that too. But it's just fun to see. Now I know it was probably fraught for the Beatles because they weren't getting these record contracts they wanted, but it's fun to see their development too, though. in terms of better gigs. He's starting to put them in the suits, which
Yep.
they rejected at first, but then it's a job, you know.
Yeah.
They started to become more professional. I got them a roadie, Mal Evans, or not Mal Evans either, Neil Aspinall. They got them a roadie. They had a roadie.
Right.
Woohoo! We got a man to pack the van.
Roadie!
They were still sleeping in the van on tour, but you know they had a roadie.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. They just everything. You know, the fan club was well underway. The bookings were getting better. He is trying to get them record deals.
Getting them on TV.
Yeah, getting them on TV. Radio was still
Yep.
important. So getting
Yep.
them radio sessions, some of which you can hear on the Beatles at the BBC and other compilations.
Yep.
Some of those early, there's
The
1962
Teenagers
radio.
Turn, I think one was called,
Yep.
like something like that. Yeah,
Just
that was
1960s radio shows, and then
Yep.
little Granada Television, the local ITV station there, had a little section on them sometime in 62, you know.
Yep.
Just starting to get a little bit of traction. Just that record contract is the stickler.
Yeah.
Oh, and the whole Pete Best.
Yeah, the whole
star
Pete
thing.
Best thing, and then Stewart dying.
Stuart
in April,
dying
and
was a
so-
big.
yeah,
thing
we got a
for
lot
them,
to cover in 62, so we'll end it here.
Yeah.
So we're ending it at the official start of Brian Epstein's era
The Epstein
with
era.
with the Beatles, which changed music forever. You know, bring in
absolutely.
George Martin, and it changed that. I mean that.
And this is why when people, I say to people, you don't have to like the Beatles' music, but you need to acknowledge their place in rock history, which would nowhere near be what it is if these things had not happened and they
Right.
had not done the things they did. And it includes guys like Brian Epstein and George Martin.
Yep.
Just the whole thing is just
Unbelievable.
pivotal
Yes.
in
Yes.
cultural history. It's like Mozart going to Vienna or wherever the hell he went, you know.
Right.
It's-
and to end with what Darth Scipio's saying here, yeah, Brian Wilson, which is insane. What
it's true.
McCartney and Lennon did, he was doing by himself.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, he had nobody of the same caliber to bounce
No.
stuff off. Not even his brothers. They were
No,
in
he
the
was
same
he was
league.
amazing, and he
Yeah.
lost it there, man. He went down a dark
lot of
path for
pressure.
a very long time.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
It's
Anywho, that's
amazing.
been fun,
That was
mate.
fun. It was
Yeah,
been
it
a
was.
great night, guys.
We managed to knock a year off. We knocked 1 year off.
We knocked 1 year off. I might have to change the title of this one to 1961. And I think I will do that. But that was a lot of fun. We will cover 62 and maybe some of 63 next week. I had a
Yeah.
ball, man. I had a ball.
Me too, mate.
Thank you for sharing your time with me.
Thank you for
70s
doing
Rock
this.
Fan. Let them know where to find you once again.
Yeah, so my wonderful, super brilliant channel, which is now, I mean, I'm nowhere near in your league, buddy, but I'm now up to 934 subscribers. 934.
Dude, we got to get you to 1,000.
Working on it. So I'll just actually, if I throw it up on the screen,
Yeah, throw it up on the screen.
So
Are
that's
you throw it up on the screen. I will throw it in the chat myself.
yeah, just to show people what it looks like, because there's a lot of people with 70s on rock and fan in their names on YouTube. So yeah, I've shared the screen with you if you want to
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on.
check it up there. So that's
Bam.
so that 70s Rock Fan. Saturday night, Brahma Bull and I on my YouTube and on his Rumble do Bourbon and Boarding, which is our hockey and drinking show.
Nice. What
He's-
time's that at?
10 p.m. Mountain Time on Saturday night.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because he's the guest on the dump Saturday night.
Indeed.
But that's at 8:30.
Yeah, and I usually go on Snow Dub before that. So
Yeah, you're good. You're
no,
good.
he's it's Lent and he's given up drinking for this week, but I'll be
Oh.
having a few drinks. So.
Yeah, right.
And then next Monday, my regular Monday show, we've got this thing now we call the Canon Film Club,
Nice.
co-presented with Tom Connors and myself, and
Yep.
with Razor Fist. Touch wood, because Razor, nobody puts any pressure on him. If he turns
Yeah.
up, he turns up, and that's great. He's a great
Yeah,
guy.
that's freaking
And then-
awesome, man.
And Austin Trunick, who wrote the Canon Film Guides, is also on that show, as well as my regular panel. And we're doing the Death Wish movies on Monday. So specifically
freaking
2,
awesome.
3, and 4 were the Canon ones. We will talk about 1 and 5 too.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah. And the other, just quickly, the other thing I do, everything I do for you, for you. I do the things you do. Is I am on Pop Culture Minefield Tuesday mornings. Morning Coffee with Brian. That's at 9 a.m. Mountain Time every week. And this week we're talking about the Fermi paradox.
Very
Is
cool.
there anybody out there?
Very cool.
So, and we've got
That
various
one
other things.
I will be watching.
And we're doing a Beatles one on the 21st. So I'm hoping, as you said, where you might have to work, but if you can sneak in, that would be great. I want to talk about specifically this argument about are they or are they not overrated? So.
Yes, which is the dumbest argument.
Yes. So anyway, that's some of my stuff, but you can see me in other places too. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So. And there's the link in the chat. So guys, if you are new here, please make sure you subscribe. Let's get them to 1,000 as soon as possible because it's definitely deserved. We're going to roll out though. DJ will be with us next week. Rob will be with us next week, which is very cool to talk 1962. And I thank you all. We'll go out with our intro song because I have nothing else to give you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Sporking Youth Podcast presents
The Beatles.
The Beatles. Who he is. A retrospective.